So in contrast to a spring tide, we also have what's known as a neap tide. And a neap tide is when the moon is oriented perpendicularly to the sun relative to the earth. You can see in this diagram that the moon is below the earth relative to where the sun is. So in this case, instead of having the gravitational forces of the sun and the moon lined up, we actually have the gravitational forces pulling in opposite directions at 90 degrees to each other. So you can see that the sun tidal bulge is in the same direction as it was during the spring tide, and that doesn't change because we are always oriented in the same direction with regards to the sun, but that the tidal bulge from the moon's gravity is now at 90 degrees. So instead of adding those two together to create a large tide, they actually sort of cancel each other out to create a moderate tide. You can see that the moon's gravitational influence on the tides is much greater than the sun's, and that's because of how close the moon is. And that holds true that when the moon is orbiting the Earth, it's not perfectly circular. In fact, it's elliptical. And when the moon is closer to the Earth, we have larger tides, as well as when it's lined up with the sun. So you can imagine that when all of these things line up, we can get a very high tide, or if they're completely unaligned, we can get a very moderate tide.